I do complain about now is that relates to complacency is meetings. I think that we had meetings because we have always had meetings, and that's what we feel like we should be doing is having meetings. And it that's not to say that every meeting is that way, right? Because it's not, because there are ones that I truly get value out of, and there's truly productive things that come out of it. But there are things that are established. That's the way we've always done it, or that's the way my predecessors did it, so I'm going to continue it. That, dude, we got to stop that. You got to stop it. And unfortunately, not everybody's at a position where they can go, hey, let's stop this.
Yeah. No, meetings are like the double-edged, sword that are they can either be hyper positive or just the worst, like, and I think limiting the amount of meetings and the number of people that need to be in there. But like also, I found a bunch of value early on in my career when someone would like grab me and be like, "Hey man, come to the staff meeting." Like, and it's kind of fun for everybody else because like you get this like A1C or a senior airman in the staff meeting who's like sitting there. Like, you get to see behind the scenes a little bit,
Yeah.
and things start to make sense because like if my supervisor's like, "Hey, like that thing you're complaining about, come with me. Let me get you some perspective on what's going on." You walk into the meeting, people are like, "What's he doing here?" He's like, "Don't worry about it." And then like you see all the things that they're working on. You're like, "Oh, like this helps me understand a little bit about everything that this organization is trying to do, how much stuff is on their plate, and how they're not happy about all the stuff they have to do. And they would love to be able to solve my problem for me. They would love to, but there's a lot of other things that have to get done first. So there's a lot of value in that and being able to see the organization. But dude, like if you're like every other day we got to have a meeting or every day, and then those people that are like, we need to bring in the head of every single department for every single meeting. It's like, but why? I don't
Yeah.
like, it's like you're trying to kill people and make them complacent by doing this.
No, that's a good point. I do. Bill Adams brought me into stuff early on,
Yep.
and not because I was complaining or I needed it. It was his own way of developing me and mentoring me. Still one of the most phenomenal people and operators that has ever existed. But
Yep.
he did that, and that, man, now that's what I need to do. I need to do that where I'm at right now in some of the meetings. The problem is that some of the stuff that we do talk about can be sensitive and involve some of their peers or something like that. So you're like, okay, well, I can't bring you in for that.
Yeah.
But when you start talking about some of the big picture stuff and some of the issues or military constructions and building moves and personnel moves and what's the future of this airframe and that kind of stuff, like that's actually good for people to kind of get perspective on.
As a senior airman, you're like, just build the building. And then you go to the meetings, and they're talking about colors of money and milcon versus, like temporary structures and who owns the land. And you figure out like real quick, like it's just like real life problems. It's like you think the military is like this special different organization outside of regular life. It's like, no, it's money, it's
Yeah.
land, who owns what. Half the time nobody knows. Like, who owns that plot of land over there? It's like, I don't know. Like, we got to ask somebody. Like, can we have it? Can we build stuff? Like personnel money and all this other stuff, O&M funds versus all the other funds.
Yeah,
It's
and if you didn't palm for the
oh
money.
yeah, and the first time you learn about how that process works, it's like, if you want to sleep well at night, let's talk about the palm process.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a nightmare.
But
It's an absolute nightmare.
but it's good because like I think it's easy as an airman to look up at everybody and be like, well, these people have all the power, rank, and authority to do whatever I think that they should be able to do, and then to peel the curtain back a little bit, and then you might still have some inputs like, well, they could still do this, and they will probably agree with you. They'll
Yeah.
probably be like, you know what, like we do have some time to do that, and you're right, but like when you see all the other stuff and how the wickets required to get you what you want, it's like, man, that's wild.
It's a big animal.
And then they're like,
Big
have you ever
animal.
thought about commissioning? And you're like, not anymore. No, that looks awful.
Thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah. Well, I think we hit complacency. Okay. And before we wrap up, I did want to talk about the adaptability thing. Did we already talk about that? The
Nope.
man, there are few things more difficult for me than when someone says this is the way we've always done it, or this is the way we do things in this MAGCOM or organization, and they're unwilling to at least entertain new ideas, and that drives me nuts. I can't stand that. Like the with the and I was thinking about this the other day when we were talking about when I always complain about senior NCOs don't need education or formal education, right? It shouldn't be a requirement. But I'm like, I have all these people running around with all these degrees. If these degrees don't make you more, flexible to new ideas, then they really are worthless. And that drives me crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it's higher learning, right? Which means that you should be able to take on other ideas and other concepts, relatively easily. And whether, you take them on and you piecemeal, like, okay, that piece is good, that piece is bad. Let me can that out. Um, then yeah, what's the point? But I
Yeah.
mean, being adaptable is also being resilient too. And I know resilient, which I don't like, not necessarily, it's not a toxic word or anything like that, but I think it's just overused now.
Yeah.
Um, and so people, and it can be hard to articulate what resilient means, but being adaptable is just being able to flex on the X. Like you're not rigid. You're not stuck in your ways. You just, okay, well, here's the situation. Here's where we want to go. Like, okay, oh, something happened. Something's changed. A variable has changed. Okay, well, let me, revector and go a different way now, or just move around that. It's adaptability is huge, and that's what we need out of folks.
I think a lot of that is, like a lot of that is ego. We see that through the pipeline where we break folks down and like their idea or their expectations of what should happen every day. Either they're just too tired to think about it or they get over it. And it's like, man, if you start out a situation, you say, this is what's going to happen, and you can't flex from there, like you're not gonna make it in our environment. And we force that over and over and over again to just, kind of live in the moment, so to speak. And it's just like, whatever happens, like we're going to figure it out. And that's on a larger scale, that I think that's kind of what we're talking about. But there's nothing worse than being that person in like those chiefs panels, right? And you're like the senior airman at NCOA or ALS or whatever it was. You raise your hand, you're like, how come we can't do this? They're like, well, we've never done it that way, and this is the way things are. It's like, that is the worst answer I've ever heard in my life. And all I heard was, I don't care about the things that are affecting you because I'm up here and you're down here. And that might not be the reality of that chief's situation or intent, but that's what it sounds like when you refuse to at least, uh, you know, entertain the idea of adaptability and new solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, like you said, that person may not actually think it, but that is how it was received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing too. Like, and we know we talk about this too. The generational stuff. It's if every one of your students, if you're a teacher, and all your students get question number 8 on your test wrong, that is a teacher problem. That is not a student problem. Because you did not teach them properly or in the way that they received the information to allow 80% of the class to get that correct. And so like that adaptability with how you deal with people and how you deal with like you could go to an organization, right? You could have a team, right? Like as a combat controller, as a team sergeant or whatever, you could be a supervisor or have a team that works a certain way. And then they're like, hey, Peaches, you're going to the 2-2 now. And you show up there and you're like, this is how I did it, here. I'm going to do that here. And it doesn't work the same way. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
got to be like, you got to be able to take yourself aside and then like look at the situation and be like, okay, like, well, how do I get through to these guys? How do I embed these ideas into this culture to get the desired results? And that
Yep.
should be the focus, is the desired results and not, anything else.
Yeah, and it's good. You should share that information. Don't, you know, accept that maybe it doesn't get, taken on board, or that you don't necessarily enact that change. But like at the same time, the other folks have got to be willing to accept that, as much rivalry as we have with each of the units, like, oh, maybe they're actually doing something like that process or whatever is actually pretty good. Maybe we should take that on because that would actually help us up here.
Dude, how many times have you heard best practices and yet
Yeah,
nobody actually looks for
nobody
those
cares.
things or implements those things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh well, that's cool. Cool story. Yeah,
I don't know if you know this. This is the 2-3, so we don't do
yeah.
things like that here. It's just
The
like
2-3. This is how we do it.
the
We're
mighty.
picking on the two. We always pick on the 2-3. It's weird.
I mean, they get all, a fair number of folks straight out of AST, right?
They
Or
do. Yeah.
STTS. Well, I
Yeah.
think if we, the 2-1, I always forget that they exist because there's other stuff going on out there. The 2-6, they're just like an easy. I'm not going to pick on those guys because, well,
Got to keep
reasons.
morale up.
We love you guys. I don't know. The 2-2 is easy to pick on because everybody wants to go to Washington, and then the 2-3's in Florida, so they're
Yeah.
just living that good life.
They
They're
are
out at
living a good
AJ's
life.
every night.
Yeah. They are out at iguanas.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's right. All right. Well, please, everybody, thanks for joining. Go to YouTube, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, hit Apple